Welcome. I am Carlos Vanarik, and this is the series, The Earth Environmental Crisis Problems, Mitigation, and Adaptation. And this is episode 2, Greenhouse Gases and the Earth's Average Temperature. There are a number of factors or problems associated with the Earth environmental crisis. And in this episode, you're going to be learning more about climate change and associated global warming. And in coming episodes, you'll learn about other factors or problems in this environmental crisis. You'll learn about tropical deforestation and the huge amounts of pollution going into the atmosphere and oceans due to human activity, such as plastic pollution into the ocean. You'll learn about the large amount of extinction of the diverse number of species on our planet of plants, animals, and insects. And you'll also learn more about other environmental problems associated with this Earth environmental crisis, such as the human population increase, the large number of human beings on the planet. So we're going to continue now with this episode 2. And let's go right to the slides I've prepared for this episode so that you can see the information, and I'll go through it and you'll be able to learn much more about the Earth and environmental crisis. The first slide is telling us that this is the Earth environmental crisis, problems, mitigation, and adaptation. This is episode 2, greenhouse gases and Earth's global temperature. And this is part 1 of this series, episode 2. I'll go ahead and have a part 2 coming up very soon of episode 2, greenhouse gases and Earth global temperature. So in order to understand climate change and the associated global warming, it's important to understand how the atmosphere works. How do greenhouse gases such as carbon dioxide and methane and other greenhouse gases, how do they keep the Earth's temperature at a certain amount or a certain level that is allowing life to be able to flourish on our planet, including us human beings, the many diverse species of plants, animals, insects, and us human beings on this planet. Well, the way carbon dioxide works, one way to look at it is this, among other factors that we're going to look at to understand carbon dioxide. First of all, carbon dioxide over the past 800,000 years is what we're looking at here. These are years before present. Zero would be the year 2021, and then 400,000 years ago or before present, 800,000 years before present. And that's the record here of how much carbon dioxide, the carbon dioxide concentration, which means the amount in the atmosphere, and it's measured in parts per million, which is abbreviated ppm. So for example, the highest previous concentration before the recent past was 300 parts per million or ppm over the last 800,000 years. And what does parts per million mean? Well, parts per million basically means, for example, if you were to take a container about 1 cubic foot, for example, in volume, and you were to sample the atmosphere, and you took this container to sample back to a laboratory and you analyzed it in this chemistry laboratory, you would find out that for all the million parts that make up that volume of this volume sample of the atmosphere, there would be dust particles, oxygen, nitrogen, water vapor, all these other gases making up this volume, and only 300 out of those parts in a million, or 300 parts per million, would be carbon dioxide in this example here. That's a very small amount, 300 parts per million out of all those million parts being just carbon dioxide. Well, those small amounts of carbon dioxide, small amounts of methane, these small amounts of greenhouse gases, water vapors, another greenhouse gas, they make a big difference in small amounts in how warm or cold the Earth's atmosphere and ocean is. For example, if there was no atmosphere, including no greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide and methane, the average temperature of the Earth would be about 0 degrees Fahrenheit. It would be about 18 degrees below 0 Celsius. If there was even an ocean, it would be frozen. There would probably be no way that life could exist on the Earth's surface on the land or in the ocean. If there was an ocean, it would probably be frozen for that matter. But because of the atmosphere we have, including these important greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide and methane and water vapor, the average temperature of the atmosphere and ocean is actually about 15 degrees above 0 Celsius, or 59 to 60 degrees Fahrenheit. So these small amounts of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, again, about 300 parts per million carbon dioxide in this example, make a big difference in making the earth be much warmer and therefore supportive of being able to provide an environment suitable for the diverse number of species of plants, animals, insects, and our species of human beings as well. So that's an important thing to keep in mind when understanding carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases, how they're measured, and that small amounts of these included in our Earth's atmosphere make a big difference in keeping the Earth warmer than it otherwise would be. Now, the other thing about these greenhouse gases is that when you look at the last 800,000 years, you might be thinking, well, how could they be determined over hundreds of thousand years how much of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases was in the atmosphere? I mean, for example, there were only instruments since around 60 years ago that are able to measure the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere and other greenhouse gases as well. And then if you think about it further, 150,000 years ago is about when the first humans evolved on the earth. Before that, there were, the earlier pre-human species. And of course, you go back 800,000 years, there's no instruments available. They're only available for about the last 60 years measuring the amount of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. So without instruments, how can we tell for the past 800,000 years how much carbon dioxide was in the atmosphere over these very long periods of time? Well, this is how it's done. The scientists, what they've done is they've gone ahead and drilled with these special drills into places such as the ice cap over Antarctica. And you can see some mountains here in the distance over Antarctica. And they've used these drills to drill as far as up to a mile to 2 miles deep, up to 1,500 to 2,000 meters or so deep into the ice caps such as Antarctica, Greenland, even up in high mountain glaciers such as the Himalayan mountains of Asia and the Andes Mountains of South America. And the drills are about this much in diameter. That's about 10 inches in diameter, about 20 centimeters in diameter. And again, going as far down as about a mile to 2 miles deep. And what they do is they pull out these ice core samples and then they slice them up into smaller segments that are, maybe around 20 to 30 inches or about 40 to 50 or so centimeters long. And this is how they look when they're sliced into smaller parts, these up to 1 to 2 mile long slices of ice core samples. They look like this, and they could be even longer, like this one's more like around 8 feet long. Then they slice them up into smaller parts and even thinner slices up to about 1 centimeter to maybe, which is about a ½ inch thick, which contains a record of decades to up to a century or so of how much carbon dioxide, how much methane, how much other gases, oxygen, for example, was in the atmosphere in the distant past. And for example, you can see that in this West Antarctic ice core piece, there's a dust layer right here. That's volcanic ash that settled on the ice approximately 21,000 years ago. So even dust particles, volcanic ash particles, are preserved in these ice core samples. And in little trapped bubbles inside these ice core samples, through the layers of the ice core samples going back through the distant past, is trapped and preserved in a frozen way the amount of carbon dioxide that was in the atmosphere, or methane and other greenhouse gases, the amount of oxygen. And what the scientists do is they go ahead and analyze these trapped bubbles in chemistry labs, in these frozen labs, And they determined how much carbon dioxide, for example, was in the atmosphere 100,000, 200,000, up to 800,000 years in the past. So that's how it's done basically scientifically. And this is a collection of many ice core samples. They're preserved in these refrigerated laboratories. Temperatures in the labs are held at about 36 degrees Celsius below 0 Celsius, or about 32.8, about 33 degrees below 0 Fahrenheit, in order to preserve these ice cores for long periods of time. So now that you understand how the amount of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases can be determined through chemical analyses in these trapped air bubbles in the ice core samples, you can see why the scientists are able to tell how much carbon dioxide was in the atmosphere, for example, over the last 800,000 years. And the other thing to notice is that during the peak amounts of carbon dioxide, when it was up around nearly 250 or 260 parts per million, those were periods when there was a warm period or interglacial, in between ice age periods. And these occurred several times during the last 800,000 years. There were also several ice age or glacial periods, the low amounts of carbon dioxide down around 170 parts per million. There were several ice ages over the last 800,000 years. And you can see right here is the last what's called warm interglacial period before the one we're in, which is this warm interglacial period in the present time. And between these two interglacial periods, when the carbon dioxide level is higher in the atmosphere, up nearly 300 parts per million, it's a time period in between the two interglacial periods when there was a glacial or ice age period, when you can see the carbon dioxide dropped off to a low of around 180 parts per million. This was the last ice age before the current time that we're in, which is again is a warmer or interglacial period. So this is the last ice age. It ended around 10,000 years ago or so. And the other thing to notice is that it would take thousands to tens of thousands of years for the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere to go up around 100 parts per million, and then thousands to maybe up to 10,000 years to tens of thousands of years even for the amount of carbon dioxide to go down about 100 parts per million again. That was due to natural changes in the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, volcanic activity, changes in the solar radiation that reaches the earth from the sun. We're going to look at more of these factors that affect the amount of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases in the atmosphere in coming slides in this episode. And the other thing is the highest concentration in the last 800,000 years was about 300 parts per million during one of these several interglacial or warm periods in the distant past, in the last 800,000 years. These changes in carbon dioxide over 800,000 years until we get to this dashed red line. But before this dashed red line, it goes way up quickly. In this grayish black curve or graph here, you see those were natural changes in carbon dioxide before human activities such as burning fossil fuels to produce energy. When you burn fossil fuels such as coal, oil, and gas, a chemical reaction occurs and carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases, methane, for example, also are produced, and these are emitted or go up into the atmosphere, and they add to the concentration meaning the amount of carbon dioxide measured in parts per million in the atmosphere. So these were all natural changes over 800,000 years. And again, it would take thousands to tens of thousands of years to go up or down 100 parts per million. All of a sudden, along this dashed red curve, in only the last 60 years, not due to natural changes, but due to human activity, human industrial and agricultural activity, the burning of fossil fuels, for example, has caused a 100 parts per million approximately increase in only about 60 years. That's a rapid increase in carbon dioxide in the atmosphere due to human activity. much faster than it would have been in the distant past due to natural activity. And the other thing to look at it is it's now up at around 410 parts per million as of 2019. 409.8 parts per million is the average for 2019. That's the last full year for which we have a record. The scientists are working on calculating the average for the year 2020, and it takes time to do the calculation. So probably in the next several months, there'll be the update of the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere in 2020 for the average for the year. So this is looking at a distant past 800,000 year record of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere and how human activity has abruptly increased it just in the past 60 years as measured by instruments around the world. This is the conclusion of part one of episode 2, greenhouse gases and Earth's global temperature. The next YouTube video will be episode 2, part 2 of this video, and on the topic of greenhouse gases and Earth's global temperature. You'll learn some more about the different greenhouse gases and the effect on the global average temperature, the temperature of the atmosphere and oceans, and how that's being influenced substantially by the substantial increase in carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases that you saw in this part one of episode 2. So part 2 of episode 2, the next video will cover that, as well as some more information on greenhouse gases. And it's very important to understand these greenhouse gases. This is an important part of understanding climate change and the associated global warming. So that these two videos, this one and the next one, will help you a lot in learning and understanding more on this particular topic. And then in coming episodes, we'll cover the other factors or problems in the Earth environmental crisis. We'll look at plastic pollution. We'll look at the amount of deforestation, of tropical deforestation, for example, and the human population growth factor or problem in the Earth environmental crisis, and also the species extinction rate increasing rapidly as the human population is increasing rapidly. So there'll be more episodes with more topics to come, more factors or problems in this Earth environmental crisis will be covered. And all these episodes of this series, the Earth environmental crisis problems, mitigation and adaptation, these will help you to have more information, to be more and better informed on being able to make decisions in your everyday lives in the years and decades to come on working not only individually, you and I as individuals, but also up to the collective international level of billions of people around the world. We can make substantial changes in the decisions we make based on this type of information that I'm presenting in these videos in order to reduce or mitigate as much as the different problems or factors in this environmental crisis. So thank you very much. I'm glad you were able to view this video and learn a lot from it. And I look forward to presenting the next video to you. Thank you so much. Take care now. Bye-bye.